fucking words ever. Like, put it in the most simplest words that you can say. Don't. I found, at least for myself, making a conclusion at the end of what you've learned is not effective at all because you just miss out on too much points. So what I do is what I put it into very simple terms and I do what's called active recalling, where you question you question yourself. You literally ask yourself like for example, here let me see this. What is pharmacokinetics? I literally ask myself that. And then in the most simplest term ever, I'd say pharmacokinetics is the movement of drugs in body. And then that's it. And then I move on. And then I do that for 5 to 10 questions, and then I go back to see if I remember. So like blah 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 blah. Go back to the last one I did, or not the last one, the first one I did. See if I can recall it again. If I can recall it again after I did 10 questions, I'm like, okay, that's a green. I'm gonna remember that for the exam, and then I keep moving on through. And I do that for 500 terms.
Oh my god.
But because this strategy does that, it puts it into like your short-term memory where you're gonna remember it for like 3 days. You gotta study again for like the next exam if it's part of the thing. So it's kind of like a cramming tactic that I do. But what I do is here. Actually, let me share. Wait, how do I screen? No, I don't have it here. This is not on my computer.
How do you do it
But
for
what?
like math?
So for math, how do I say this? Does your teacher want you to remember like terms?
We have
Or
like a formula sheet that we could write down.
okay, so you don't need to remember formula. To do math, you just gotta, how do I say this? I know like every teacher says like, oh, you just gotta keep doing and doing it. Do it until you basically like you're going way too fast. Like you already know what the step is gonna be after you've done the thing. Does that make sense?
Okay. Okay.
I don't get it.
Do it when you like. Wait, you don't get it or you get it?
I don't get it.
So like for math, what is it called? For like for example, a question. Let's say like I'm doing like really. I haven't done math in it. Well, actually, I have because it's pharmacology. But for math, I do one formula until I get so used to it that I know what's gonna happen after. So like I insert everything and I already know where everything's gonna go after I've read like the case study or the question. So like for example, like the pharmacology one that I had is like this 84-year-old patient that has blah 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 blah. The doctor has ordered 50 milligrams of acetaminophen or whatever it's fucking called. How many drug orders? Blah blah blah. And then you try to also picture how do I say this? You know, like how like the letters equal something. So like for example, X could equal this, or like A could equal this,
Yeah,
because it's like a
variables.
formula. Yeah, variables like you just basically plug, right? Try to put them in your mind as well. So like if A equals 53, don't just put that in your paper. Put that in your head, kind of like a like usage for later, because it helps you know what you can do with that formula, if that makes sense. I don't exactly know how to say it, but like
I
how
get
I
you.
study, you get it? You get it?
Yeah.
Kind of like don't just put it on the paper and say, okay, so I got this is one of the variables that I need that is missing. I found it. Now I need to insert it later. Don't just forget it. Still have it in your mind, because having it in your mind, how does it like helps you later on in the question,
Makes it
because you're like,
easier
oh, okay,
to
I
put
already
it in.
I already have this. Yeah, exactly. Whereas for like that's for math. For like things that are like science, where you need to remember like terms like what is or red blood cell, what is a white blood cell, whatever. I do that active recall Feynman technique where I literally turn the thing into a question. So like if you need to memorize things about white blood cells, I'd say first, what is a white blood cell? And then I put a super simple definition. And then I'd answer it to myself. Because even though it's such a simple definition, when you come across like a multiple choice question about white blood cells, there's going to be an answer there that's similar to your question that you answered yourself. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's
So it's like,
smart.
how do I say this? It's like already anticipating the question before the question already happened. It trains your mind to like, oh, this question is kind of similar to the question that I made up by myself. I think this is it because it helps you with it. That's what I do.
Okay, so what about like reading? Like remember like a passage?
Remembering a passage? What do you
Yeah,
Like
like
for English?
yeah,
what do you mean a passage? Like,
like let's say like you're taking a test, and
hmm,
the teacher's like asking you questions about like what you've read.
oh, what you read. Okay. So when it's like a giant reading, like 50 pages, is that what
Yeah,
you're talking about?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly like that.
It is, I tell you, it is bullshit to read the whole fucking thing. What I do is at the end of the chapter, if there's a conclusion, read that. You don't even need to read the whole chapter. Read the
Mm.
conclusion at the end of the chapter. If there's no conclusion, quickly skim over it. So like what I mean is, so I don't, are they cut up in paragraphs?
Well, I have a sociology class where
Uh-huh.
we would have to read like basically half the whole text
Yeah, okay.
of the whole book,
So
and then mhm.
what I do with that is if there's no paragraphs or if there's no things that cuts up the large quantities of words, I make my own. So like let's say I'm gonna read half of this page, but reading it not in depth where it's like, what does this mean? Like trying to decipher everything.
Mhm.
Just have the overall knowledge of it because it's impossible to understand everything. So just get the overall knowledge of like, so what I'm saying is make a checkpoint yourself where you want to like know what's the content of this page or half of this page or a quarter of this page. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like read half of the page and then try to make like a summary in the end. Because reading is different. Like reading a book is different than memorizing something that's like term based like science. When it's science when it so basically for math, try to be active with the formulas and keep activating your brain, remembering the things that you have there. For science, do active recalling where you constantly ask yourself questions that could be on the test. Just like, okay, so like, what is this? What is that? If this happens, then what does this do? Oh, okay, so this happens. So what will happen if I do this? So it's just like questions that string from each other,
Mhm.
because that's what science is. Because they're basically all connected. It helps you get like that connecting thing.
Mhm.
For reading like large books, like for example right now I'm doing again pharmacy, and it's talking about like nursing fucking policies and shit like that. It just takes forever to read.
Mhm.
I cut it up into tiny parts, pieces where I can digest the information properly and learn. So like for example, I was learning about nursing rights, so I won't read the whole thing. I'll read like one part of it that's all like similar to each other. So like for example, nursing rights, and then there's a section in there that talks about, I don't know, like civil law. I'll learn I'll I'll pull up my computer and actually take notes while I'm reading. So the things that pop out to me, the things
Mhm.
that don't pop out to you, they don't matter. Because like it's the same thing as like the teacher when they're about to do the exam. What type of questions do you think they'll ask from you? The ones that pops out for them, the ones that they're like,
Mhm.
oh crap, this is a good question. Those are the same questions that'll be like, oh shit, this is a good question, like that kind of pops up to you too while you're reading the textbook.
Mhm.
And then those questions that like don't really bother you much, don't be worried about that, because if you're not bothered by those questions, you like your brain passively took it in. So like if you're answering like an exam or whatever of that, listen to your gut, because there's like a subconsciousness behind your conscious where you're like, I feel like I know it's this answer, but not, and you double think it, go for it. Because it's like 60 to 70% of the time, your first answer is the right one.
True.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now for like, how do I say this? If if you guys are like every start of the class is like, what did you guys read yesterday about this chapter? Blah blah blah. Is that what you're asking?
No.
Can
But yeah,
you,
but well, yeah. So what if it's like that too?
if it's like that too, literally, how do I say this? It depends on the class. If the class doesn't contribute much, like let's say it's only you that's really speaking in that class, say things in the beginning of the chapter. But if it's like a really competitive class where people like want to be smart, say things in the middle of the chapter where people didn't know that, if that makes sense. Because it makes you look good in front of the class, and it gets you like that participation grade.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if your teachers do that,
Yeah.
but general rule of thumb, you should already have knowledge of that chapter the day before because you were already reviewing it when you were taking it section by section.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So math, be active with the formulas. Always have it in your brain. Don't just write it down on paper because it helps you train your brain to like understand the math problem, okay? And then science, anything that's term based where you need to remember like a term. Active recalling where you put into simple words and you ask yourself the questions so it kind of trains your brain. Questions that are similar to exams. And then for like large readings, don't do an in-depth reading. Just like read it. Just like blah 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 blah. Oh shit, that's cool. And then the thing that you think that's cool, write that down.
Okay.
Because it's like it's too much information to digest and it's a waste of time reading the whole thing. Because it's like it could literally last you like 3 hours reading a 50 fucking page book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's a waste of time and I want to do things at that time. I want to go play video games. I want to do that. So literally make it in a way where you cut it into sections where they're like you can easily digest the information. Okay.
Got it.
I'm sorry, I went on a rant on there.
Bro, that show's amazing.